Alright, ladies and gentlemen, for this presentation we're going to take a look at our next body system, the circulatory system. So like all of our body systems, we always want to start our discussion with thinking about what is the purpose. Well, any organism that has a circulatory system, the circulatory system actually only has one main purpose, and that is to transport. The circulatory system is actually responsible for transporting any number of things all around the body. And it's basically just a system of tubes and a pump to perform that transportation. Now, that transportation isn't really the interesting thing. It's all of the things that it does transport that make the circulatory system interesting. And that includes waste, both to and from the kidneys, as well as waste to the lungs for exhalation or whatever respiratory system an organism may possess. That includes nutrients from the digestive system into all of the different cells of the body. That includes cells all around the body, such as red blood cells, which are carrying oxygen, or white blood cells, which are helping fight disease, or platelets, any number of cells that need to be transported from place to place. It also carries enzymes from place to place, so that there's chemical reactions that can occur inside the blood, or sometimes on the outside of certain cells. It carries hormones from place to place, so that these hormones can actually get from cells and different parts of your body can actually communicate in important ways. And we mentioned it already with the red blood cells, but it also transports oxygen throughout the body. So that's the real thing with the circulatory system. The circulatory system is relatively simple in its purpose. It is simply a transport system and nothing else. Now, where it gets interesting is sort of how it goes about doing that and all the different aspects involved when the circulatory system does that. So the first thing to understand is the circulatory system is a closed system. All right. Technically, the blood that's in your circulatory system doesn't really leave. There are places for it to be recycled, and there are places for new blood to be put in there by your body when it needs to be replaced. But in general, the circulatory system is a closed system that has no entrance and exit. It's just a big loop. All right. Now, the thing about this loop is there's actually multiple circuits. And the multiple circuits mean that there's sort of like miniature loops within the bigger loop. All right. And if you look at the diagram that we have over here, what you can see, all right, is that if I start the blood here, what's going to happen is it's going to go up here, through this tissue, back to the heart, and then it's going to go up here, and up here it goes to that tissue, back to the heart. It also goes down through this tissue and back to the heart. And over here, so it actually broke off and then went back to the heart. So it's actually a loop. Now there's multiple loops within there. And the first of these multiple loops actually is called the pulmonary circuit. Now this word pulmonary has to do with your lungs. All right, that's the easy way to remember this. And the pulmonary circuit actually has blood travel from the heart to the lungs and back to the heart. It is during this circuit that the blood actually collects oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. All right, that's one of the primary things that the circulatory system does. It works with your lungs to collect oxygen from the atmosphere and to remove carbon dioxide from your blood. Now, the other side of that is what we call the systemic circuit, which means that this blood that is now back from the lungs, filled with oxygen, has to get to every other system. That's why we call it the systemic circuit. And so the systemic circuit goes heart to body and then back to the heart. And that's the two loops that we have that go everywhere. We always have one loop that goes up because a huge volume of your blood percentage-wise goes to your brain, and then a loop that goes down because that blood's going to your arms, to your chest cavity, to your abdomen, to your legs, and then again back to your heart. And then the last one, which isn't really a circuit, but it's worth discussing, is that there's always a percentage of that blood that's siphoned off to immediately go to the heart, because the heart is tissue as well, which means that it also requires everything that the blood has for it. And so you have in the cardiac flow, blood comes from the heart to the outside of the heart to feed the tissues and then back into the heart to be recirculated. So you have three circuits: pulmonary circuit, systemic circuit, and then the cardiac flow. Pulmonary circuit is heart to lung to heart. Systemic circuit is heart to body to heart. And then the cardiac flow is the heart to the outside of the heart so that the tissue can actually have some healthy, blood, and then back to the heart so it can be rejuvenated. And so it's basically just a big loop. Okay? Now, what you have here is, and I just want to get rid of this so that we can talk about some of this in detail. You have some key ideas here. So first off, here's the heart, okay? And you have these vessels that are carrying blood back and forth to the heart. Now, typically in diagrams, and this is one of the most important things, we color code the vessels. Blue means that the blood is lacking in oxygen, which means it actually has carbon dioxide. And red means that the blood has oxygen. Okay? Now, that's not actually the case. Your blood is always red. It's either red or darker red. All right? It's never blue. But we do use that in diagrams to clearly stipulate when there is a high level of oxygen and when there is a low level of oxygen. And you can see that the heart is basically divided into halves based upon where that oxygen is and is not. The other thing I want to point is you can see here, 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 and here, these points where the blood turns from red to blue. And those are actually simulating all tissues in your body. That actually happens everywhere. And it is at that point that we find vessels called capillaries. We'll discuss the vessels soon. And those capillaries are actually where the blood loses the oxygen and gains the carbon dioxide from all the cells in your body. All right? So let's talk a little bit about the pump and the blood vessels. So this diagram is the heart. And again, I have color-coded the heart so that you can see where oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood is. Now, the first thing I want to say about the heart is that the heart is the muscle you have that never rests. From even before you are born until the day you die, your heart will beat and it will never stop. That's sort of an impressive thing. Imagine lifting weights with your arm every single moment of every single day and never resting. Your heart is a very impressive organ, even if it's very simplistic. It actually has nothing to do with your emotions or your feelings or anything like that. Your heart is simply the location that blood gets pushed throughout your body and then returned to be pushed again. Now, a couple of things that need to be said before we get into the heart. All right. First off, there are three types of vessels in your body. There are arteries, there are veins, and there are capillaries. I have color-coded them again. Arteries are very thick, and they are highly muscular tubes that carry blood away from the heart. That's actually a really key idea here. Arteries carry blood away. It is a common misconception that arteries carry oxygenated blood. That is not always the case. You know it's an artery, outside of the fact that it's thick and muscular, because it's carrying blood away from the heart. Veins return blood to the heart, and they are thinner tubes, and they have valves. So arteries are thick and muscular, veins are thinner and have valves. They actually prevent the blood from flowing backwards. And then the third type of vessel is actually where arteries and veins meet, and that's called capillaries. They're very small and very thin. In fact, they kind of have to be thin because a certain type of blood cells actually can squeeze out of them and then back in. You have capillaries everywhere, all over the surface of your body, inside your body, touching every piece of tissue that you have. Capillaries are very important because they are the site of exchange. So exchange of what? Exchange of anything. Your cells need to take in oxygen and give off carbon dioxide waste. That's where that happens. Your cells need to give off urea waste so that it can be filtered to your kidneys. That's where that happens. Your cells need to take in nutrients. That's where that happens, okay? Capillaries are the site of exchange. Your circulatory system is all about transport. Well, the capillaries are where whatever's being transported is being delivered. Your capillaries are where whatever needs to be gotten rid of is picked up. Okay? So now let's take a look at this diagram of the heart. I'm going to start tracing a path through the heart. I just want you to sort of think about how this is working out. So here, I have the superior and inferior vena cava. The vena cava is just the single biggest vein in the body. That's where all the other veins end up meeting. Superior means up, so the superior vena cava comes from your head. Inferior means down. The inferior comes from like your chest cavity and like all the other parts of your body. They dump blood into this little chamber called the atrium. When the atrium beats, flexes, it pushes blood into the ventricle, and this is the right side of the heart. So the inferior and superior vena cava dump blood into the right atrium, and then the right atrium pushes it into the right ventricle. You'll see right here there's a valve. These valves are very important because they prevent blood from flowing backwards. Sometimes people have problems with their valves. They can have things called heart flutters or heart murmurs. They tend to be problems with the valves where there's some leakage and the blood flows backwards. That's not good. It actually makes the heart work harder. From the ventricle, this blood is then pumped into the pulmonary artery. Now the pulmonary artery splits up here into two pieces and is the only place where deoxygenated blood is in an artery, and it's because it's being pushed toward the lungs. Now in the lungs, it gets filled with oxygen and the carbon dioxide gets taken away, and then it returns. And it returns via the pulmonary veins, which incidentally are the only veins that carry oxygenated blood. The pulmonary veins dump blood into the left atrium. When it contracts, it pushes blood into the left ventricle. Now you see this over here where I've written left ventricle, left side, how these walls are thicker than these walls? That's because the left side of your heart has to push blood all the way throughout your body, so it is a little bit stronger than the right side. So as blood ends up in the left ventricle, it gets pushed, when the ventricle contracts, into the first artery, which is called the aorta. And then from the aorta, it goes everywhere. You'll see that there's the three tubes that would take it up into the brain. And then there's also this tube which takes it down into the rest of your body. All right? And so it's this big cycle. Blood comes into the right side of your heart. Your atria contract, pushes blood into your right ventricle. Your right ventricle contracts, which pushes blood into your pulmonary artery and sends it to the lungs. In the lungs, it gets oxygen and then comes back to the left atrium. From the left atrium, it needs to go into the left ventricle, which contracts and pushes blood throughout the heart. That push is with such force that it pretty much brings it back to the inferior and superior vena cava, and the cycle repeats. I'm going to strongly recommend that you watch that section of the video again. There is a lot to remember. The last thing that we want to discuss in this video is the blood itself. Your blood has a lot of things in it. There's actually plasma as well, which is not written here, which is basically just various fluid and chemicals, some of which are enzymes and some of which are minerals, vitamins, all sorts of things that you require. But your blood is basically made of three things. Red blood cells, which carry oxygen, have no nucleus, and they're recycled by the spleen. They're made in your bone marrow. You have your white blood cells, which have a huge variety of types, and they fight invaders. And your platelets, which are small cells that release chemicals that clot blood. The important thing to think about when it comes to this is that red blood cells carry oxygen, have hemoglobin. White blood cells have a big variety, fight invaders, and platelets are small cells that are used to help clot your blood, mostly for when you have wounds. All of your blood cell types are made in your bone marrow, the hollow part on the inside of your bone. All right, I know this one was a lot. This is the circulatory system.